So what was the Philippines like? In one word, amazing. Absolutely amazing experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. It's hard to kind of capture it and describe it, but it was a very different life. Moved down to Manila early 2010. I think March or April 2010. And within days was teaching. So it was an extraordinary experience to begin. At that point, we'd been planning for about 4 months to put this all together. It was on track, but the timelines were really tight. We started small with about 10 students in the first class. A lot of it was interactive and physical training. So it wasn't just classroom, it was a mix of classroom into the dining room, service skills, communication skills, very detailed. So because of that, we started small, and very quickly, because of the numbers we needed to push through there, we scaled up to a max of 35 per class. So it was full on. Something that was really incredible for me was getting back. Something I hadn't done in a long time was working kind of regular hours. Not quite 9 to 5, but I was going home at night. I hadn't done that for over 15 years. And that was an adjustment I hadn't really given a whole lot of thought to how that might feel or how that might be. To be quite honest, I loved it. Much as I loved what I was doing before then, I really got a kick out of finishing the day's work, going home and cooking a meal. It was extraordinary. I found myself getting into a routine where I'd start my day pretty early, really early, around 6 a.m. I'd get about an hour of laptop work done before I go to do my teaching. Class generally started at 8:30, finished by 4 o'clock. And what made it challenging was that I still was very much responsible for 5 ships at that time and the performance. And reporting systems and all sorts of things with that, and visits. So I was typically, any given day, I guess, responding to or sending somewhere between 30 to 50 emails. So I say I was teaching from 8:30 to 4, so there was no time during that. I actually would work through the breaks. There were coffee breaks and lunch breaks, and I'd jump onto the laptop then just to be able to keep up with everything else that I was involved in at that time. But what I found myself quickly doing, so Monday to Friday, I figured, okay, that's going to be work. But I managed to clear myself out on the weekends. So Saturday and Sunday, they were mine. No work. Didn't respond, didn't send emails. I managed just to pack it into a Monday to Friday. And that was extraordinary. That hadn't happened to me for the longest time. Friday would come, I'd be absolutely shattered. And this experience gave me a whole new gratitude, a whole new admiration of anybody involved in any kind of teaching, because it's amazing, but it's so exhausting. So I get to Friday afternoon, my voice would be shot, my energy would be just shot to bits. This was very high energy training we were doing, and it was packing. We could have easily done 3 weeks of training. We were packing that into 1 week, essentially 5 days. So the pace that it went at was extraordinary. The students were amazing. I've always loved working with Filipino people, being around Filipino people. They have incredibly high work ethic. Guests love our Filipinos, always did. They just have this lovely way about them. So the students themselves, they were just a joy to be around. They were, in the age profile, they were early 20s into mid 20s. Just incredibly excited because their journey had already begun. They were shortly thereafter qualifying the orientation course. They were shortly thereafter going to the first ships. So it was incredibly exciting for them as well. One of the biggest benefits for me was that during that time, as we started to send these, trained new employees out to the fleet, we put several triggers in place to gauge and see how they were doing. We needed to measure if this was successful, and if so, how successful was it. So we put a lot of triggers in place. The ship were aware that they were coming in from the orientation class, and we put together a step-by-step review of how the performance was, especially in those earlier weeks, the first few weeks aboard. And what was especially fun for me was that I would typically do 2 weeks at a push, 3 weeks of classes. And then I'd be on a plane and I'd be flying to Singapore, I'd be flying to Hong Kong, and picking up ships there and doing my thing, doing what I was doing. The coolest thing was going onto those ships and now seeing these newly hired employees that had gone through the orientation. And I mean, I got such joy, pride out of that. And I tell them, towards the end of the orientation, I say, guys, you're going to be going onto the ships. I'm going to be coming onto those ships, so I expect to hear greatness. You have this huge advantage over every other new hire that you're going through this training. So make it matter, make it count. And also, you're representing me. It's my reputation on the line. So I made that very clear. That was the only thing that I asked from them in return, was to do me proud. And boy, did they do me proud. They were incredible. Within a couple of months of this rolling out, we started to compile the data, started to compile the feedback. And I think in a nutshell, the feedback across the fleet, now at this time, 16 ships in the fleet. So it was about 2 or 3 months into it. So we purposely distributed these newly trained new hires out among the fleet so that we could gauge from multiple touch points. And I guess in a nutshell, the biggest feedback that came back was that it felt more like a returning employee than it did a new hire employee. And to me, that was the greatest compliment I could have received. And the ships were fanatical about it. They saw the benefits of it. I mean, these kids were just hitting the ground running. They were crushing it. They were getting promoted much quicker than before. Guest experience was elevated. All the touch points we put in place, it was like a no-brainer. We should have done it years before. Well, say politics and funding and different reasons, it was incredibly complex to put together. But the benefits far outweigh that. And if anything, we should have done that years ago. So that was my lifestyle at that point. I'd started to make some terrific friends in Manila. And I lived in a bit of a bubble. If anyone's been to Philippines, it was in an area called Makati. And Makati's kind of an expat. A lot of the expats hang out, live in what I would consider a bubble. And within that, I lived in a place called Fort Bonifacio, which is a very up and coming place. Just everything you needed was there. Terrific selection of restaurants, shopping, all the good stuff, all the city life stuff. And I just found that it was a wonderful time in my life, and work, to say Monday to Friday was work, but I loved it. It was, it would give you such energy, even at the same time it was exhausting. But then the weekends were mine, and took trips to different parts of Philippines on public holiday weekends. We'd fly to Palawan or a bunch of other places, hit the beach, Boracay, places like that. And that actually lasted it extended past a year. I lived there for a little over a year and a half. I tried to stay there as long as I could because I absolutely loved it. We hit a target of 500 employees. The Allure came out as planned. The other ships kept up, maintained their high performance levels. So job done. It achieved what we had put it in place for. What was next? That was the big question, and it came. We had initially wanted to make this training course user friendly to travel with it. Basically, that was yeah, it was virtual. We could move it anywhere, reasonably easy, and that's where the next steps came. So I'll jump into that tomorrow. It took me across continents in, in continuing this journey, but it's just really, really cool to relive, for me to relive that at that time in my life. It was felt like my pinnacle, in that incredible 20-year career that I had, and I just look back on it and smile because it was so good to me, so good to me. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks as always for viewing. Please have a lovely rest of your day, and please stay safe. Thanks so much. Bye.